What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. We are attacking some prototypical Patriots receivers on today's episode. Well, we think they might be prototypical Patriots receivers. Of course, this is a little bit of a complicated process this year. As we've talked about on the podcast before, we are trying to figure out what it is exactly Eliot Wolf and this new Patriots front office regime will be looking for, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, when we get to those positions, I think we're going to see a relatively similar kind of player make his way to New England in terms of the roles that they're trying to fill, because I don't think schematically they're going to change all that much defensively. But offensively, that's what we need to try to figure out. And when it comes to the receivers, it seems like we're looking for height, weight, speed guys, physical freaks. That's what the Ron Wolf executive tree has drafted in the first and second rounds in the past. Before we get into some of the details on that, I do want to tell you we have the great Steve Palazzolo from Pro Football Focus joining us on today's episode. We're going to be talking about why he likes Drake Maye more than Jayden Daniels. We're going to be talking about that Kansas City model that we've talked about before on the podcast. Boy, could you acquire a veteran quarterback the way the Chiefs acquired a veteran quarterback in 2013 in Alex Smith? I don't know, somebody like, say, Jacoby Brissett? Could you use a high-end pick in the first round on an offensive tackle the way the Chiefs did with Eric Fisher back in 2013 and maybe build through the trenches that way if you're New England and, go after somebody like Joe Alt potentially and bide your time and wait for the right quarterback at the right time and invest in him there? Well, you've got a new head coach. It was Andy Reid at the time for the Chiefs. It's obviously Gerard Mayo at the time now for the Patriots. Is there a blueprint there for New England to follow? Steve and I get into that. We're also going to be talking about what the Patriots should be looking for, whether it's Drake Maye, Jayden Daniels, or anybody else, in terms of natural playmaking ability. I think Steve brings up some great points when it comes to that being a necessity in today's game. If you want to compete with the highest end quarterbacks in today's game, you've got to be able to create off script. You've got to be creative, period, at that quarterback position to make things happen that not you, not your coach, not your teammates believed could happen before the ball was snapped. But because of your innate ability to simply create something when it's not there and you didn't expect it to be there, that's unfortunately the name of the game in today's NFL. And so who fits that suit best? Great conversation with Steve Palazzolo. We'll get to that in a few minutes, but let's get back to this receiver conversation, the prototypes at receiver. So how do we figure it out? We go back to this Ron Wolf executive tree. We're looking at Ron Wolf, Ted Thompson, John Dorsey, John Schneider, Reggie McKenzie, Scott McCloughan, Brian Gutekunst. If you want to throw in the Mike Sherman picks, the early aughts, right after Ron Wolf stepped down, he hired Mike Sherman. He was head coach and general manager. Didn't last long there in Green Bay, but he's technically a Wolf guy too, so his picks are in here as well. But we're taking all of those front office chiefs, and at the receiver spot, we looked at all of their first and second round picks at that position. There were 18 players included there. Everybody from Javon Walker, a first-round pick of the Packers in 2002, to Jordy Nelson, to Devontae Adams, to Randall Cobb, who was a second-round pick, to DK Metcalf and Golden Tate and Dwayne Eskridge. Friend of the Next Pats podcast, Dwayne Eskridge, if you remember, to Amari Cooper, who was a high-end first-round pick of Reggie McKenzie's back in the day with the Raiders. What are these guys typically looking for? Michael Crabtree, Josh Doxson. Oof. First name, kind of a hit, I guess, though not as a top 10 pick, which he was. Second name, certainly not a hit in any way, shape, or form for the Commanders. Both those guys are Scott McCloughan guys. So when you take them all together, what is it that this tree, and maybe Eliot Wolf, therefore, really covets at that spot? I can tell you on average, after looking at all of these players, all 18, averaging them together, on average, you're talking about guys that are 6'1", 203 pounds. So just a shade over 200 pounds, but good size at 6'1". Average 40 times of 4.45 and short shuttle times of 4.18. Both pretty quick. Very explosive. 36.5-inch vertical on average and a 10'4" broad jump on average. Both of those jumps, by the way, are above the 60th percentile. And the broad jump is close to the 70th percentile. So especially when you're talking about guys that are over 6 feet and some of the movement skills involved here, you're talking about some freaks. That 40 time is in the 69th percentile as well. So fast, explosive, with good size. There ain't many of them out there. Okay. But what we did find, and this helped me set some thresholds when looking at this year's draft class, that of the 18 players that we studied, 13 were at least 6 feet tall, 15 were at least 197 pounds, 15 had 40 times of at least 4.51 or better. Jordy Nelson actually clocked a 4.51, not excellent. He had a great 10 time, though. I think he was 1.5 flat, which is almost 90th percentile in terms of his 10-yard split on his 40. Be that as it may, that was our low-end threshold for the 40 time. 13 of the 18 players had a 35-inch vertical or better. 14 of the 18 had a 10-foot broad jump or better, and 13 had a short shuttle of 4.3 or better. Not excellent, but again, we're just setting thresholds here. Because if you just worked off the averages, almost nobody would check every box when it comes to the averages. It's a real physical freak. If you're talking about a guy who's 6'1", 203, ran a 4.45, a 4.1 short shuttle, 36.5-inch vertical, 10. I think Rome Odunze, in terms of guys who tested, might be the only guy who checks every box if we just went off the averages. But we'll go off of these thresholds instead. We'll work from the thresholds. And that gives us a workable set of receivers in this class that feel like quote unquote prototypes for this year. So there's 6 categories there between height, weight, 40 time, vertical, broad jump, short shuttle. 6 categories. Of those 6 categories, 13 guys met the mark for 5. That's all we were looking for. It's not a huge number. 13 players. What you'll find if you go back and you look yourselves, for any freaks out there that are as interested in this stuff as me, you'll find a lot of guys don't do the short shuttle. So a lot of missed opportunities there, or maybe they don't do the short shuttle because they know they're not going to be very good in the short shuttle. That's usually what I believe when it comes to the testing stuff. If you choose not to do it, unless you're Marvin Harrison Jr. and you just don't want to test because you think you're so good, and you are, that you don't need to test to still be a top 5 pick. Those scenarios are few and far between. But if generally speaking, you don't test in something, I think it's because you probably know you're not going to score all that well. 13 players checked at least 5 of these boxes. 3 of them checked all 6. And I'll give you those names right now. One is Rome Odunze, friend of the podcast. Talked about him a great deal on this podcast. 6'3", 212, 39-inch vertical, 4.45 40, 10'4" broad jump, 4.03 short shuttle. This guy is athletic enough to produce after the catch, though that wasn't really the offense at Washington. I think he could fit into that kind of offense at the next level. Great size for contested catches, runs really sharp routes, and yet he's a very smooth athlete. So explosive, just the total package, in my opinion, at that position, and should be a top 10 pick. Patriots, in all likelihood, not going to have a chance to draft him. These other 2 names, though, they will. Again, these next 2 guys are 2 of 3 that checked every single box for the Patriots this year. For our prototypical Patriots piece that works off some thresholds that I'm working off. You understand the stipulations by now. Rome Odunze's teammate, Jalen McMillan from Washington, 6'1", 197. He just barely ticks that weight threshold there. Has the size, has the explosiveness with a 37-inch vertical and a 10.7 broad jump, a 4.47 40. Listen, is it blazing? Is it one of the 5 best times at this year's combine? No, but it's better than 4.51. Box checked. Now he's considered to be sort of a big slot. If you read up on some of the scouting reports on Jalen McMillan, and I have to make some calls on Jalen McMillan and see what people around the league are thinking about when it comes to him and his projected role at the next level. So if he's a big slot, it's not necessarily what the Patriots need. They've got plenty of interior guys right now, but those physical traits would suggest maybe he could play on the boundary, and somebody from the Wolf tree would allow him to do that and see if he can get by there. This next name could be a similar sort of projection to McMillan, because I think he's perceived as a quote unquote big slot, and his quickness would suggest that he can play in the slot and he can use some route running nuance to be able to free himself up. to create some easy targets for whoever's playing quarterback with this player at the next level. But it's Luke McCaffrey. Ed McCaffrey's son, Christian McCaffrey's brother, 6'2", 198, 4'4", 640, 402 short shuttle. Really quick, 36-inch vertical, 10'1" broad. Check, 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 and check. All 6 markers. Luke McCaffrey fits the bill. So on day 2, maybe even day 3, I'm not sure how long these guys will last. It gets a little dicey once you get past, I don't know, the first 35, 40 picks, trying to figure out where these guys will land. But Luke McCaffrey, Jalen McMillan, and Rome Odunze, those are your check all the boxes receivers on the prototypical Patriots list this year. Now, here are the other names. I told you there were 13 total. Malik Neighbors, LSU. Patriots, in all likelihood, unless they trade back from 3 and they end up in the top 10, they're not going to have a chance to draft him. Brian Thomas Jr., Malik Neighbors' teammate at LSU, 6'3", 209, a true X. In my opinion, in all likelihood, not going to have an opportunity to draft him. He's going to go maybe in the back half of the first round, but again, unless the Patriots trade back or maybe they trade up from 34, I don't think they're going to be able to land him. If they could, I think he'd be the perfect fit in that he's exactly what they need. They need a boundary guy. They've got plenty of guys who can play inside. They have a handful of guys who can play both inside and out. You talk about somebody like Kendrick Bourne being that Z option. Brian Thomas could be that true X, 4'3", 340 at 6'3", 209, 38.5-inch vertical, all kinds of explosiveness, all kinds of contested catch ability, all kinds of speed to be able to threaten safeties. He's what they need. Adonai Mitchell, who we've talked about on the podcast before, I would put him in that same class. But again, another guy who's going to be a first-round pick. So if the Patriots take a quarterback at 3 overall and then they're waiting until 34, I'm not sure they'll even have an opportunity to draft Adonai Mitchell. Maybe. He's sort of on the borderline, I think. But then we get into our names that are seemingly, according to some of the consensus mock work out there, more solidly day 2 or day 3 people. Xavier Legette from South Carolina, 6'1", 221, 4'3", 940, 40-inch vertical, all kinds of juice. We've mocked him to the Patriots before, 34 overall. If they are dying for a big-bodied receiver with real speed, a true prototype, someone off this list, and they want to get somebody that they feel like they can pair with a young quarterback and allow those 2 players to grow together for the foreseeable future, I think Xavier Legette might be the best option at 34. But I think you might have to get him at 34 if you really want him. Because I don't know how much longer he's going to last. Because as you'll see on this list, the number of receivers with real size and real athleticism, real speed, starts to dwindle here pretty quickly. The next name on my list is Johnny Wilson out of Florida State, 6'6", 231. Looking like a tight end out there. And maybe he has sort of a Jimmy Graham style role at the next level. But he ran a 4.52. That's just beyond the threshold that we set for the 40 time. But he checks 5 of the 6 boxes. The 40 time he doesn't get, but he gets every other box. Even the short shuttle at 4.11. That's pretty quick for a man of that size. So he has some impressive physical traits, don't get me wrong. But I don't think he's anybody's idea of a prototype at receiver just because he's so big. 231, 6'6". And he doesn't have that kind of speed that you ideally would like for a player at that position to have. But he makes our list because he checks 5 of the 6 boxes. Then there's Ryan Flournoy out of Southeast Missouri State, 6'1", 202. Went to the Senior Bowl. Had what looked to be a pretty productive week there against Power 5 competition. You need that. Coming out of Southeast Missouri State, playing for the Redhawks there. 39.5-inch vertical, 11-foot broad jump. This guy is NFL caliber explosive. He's just coming from a smaller program. And again, maybe he's a day 3 option for you. But if you wait until day 3, now you're really rolling the dice. Say you wanted a tackle at 34 instead of Xavier Legette. Okay. Then I could see you going after Flournoy. Or I could see you going after Cornelius Johnson from Michigan, 6'3", 212, 4'4", 440, 37.5-inch vertical, 10'7" broad. Feisty in the run game. The only box he didn't check was that short shuttle time, 4.37 in the short shuttle. But if they're looking for guys who want to block, that are going to run this West Coast style offense that Alex Van Pelt is bringing from Cleveland, but you're seeing it across the league and you're seeing it in places like San Francisco and you're seeing it thrive in spots like that because, in part, because they have receivers who are willing to block. I could see them falling into maybe not love, but falling into like with Cornelius Johnson from Michigan. Then there's Bub Means from Pitt. Wild ride for him. Started his college career as a corner at Tennessee, transfers out, goes to play receiver at La Tech, transfers out, ends up at Pitt, catches 41 passes for 721 yards and 6 touchdowns last year. Goes and plays in the Shrine game, has a great pre-draft process in terms of 39.5-inch vertical, 4'4", 340, size, athleticism. That's what we're looking for this list. A couple of late names. Devon Vele. I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly there. 6'4", 203. Angular body type, long and thin. 26 years old is what he'll be as a rookie this year. 2-year mission with the LDS Church in Samoa, but then ended up being a 3-year starter at Utah. 10'6" broad jump, 36-inch vertical. At that size, it's pretty explosive. That's not bad. Then there's Cole Dow out of Dayton. Might be undrafted, but wanted to get him on the list here. Thanks to Kent Lee Platt, who I lean on so frequently while we're putting this prototypical Patriots list together. Puts together the relative athletic scores for all these players. You follow him at MathBomb. If you don't, you should. But I found Cole Dow's numbers from his pro day on Kent Lee Platt's website, ras.football. 4.57 40. Okay, not what we're looking for. But in terms of the height and the weight, the vertical at 38 inches, the broad jump at 10.7, the short shuttle time at 4.2. He also had a 6'8", 4.3 cone. We're not really doing all that much 3 cone for this particular list, but that's impressive. That's some real quickness there. At 6'8", sorry, excuse me, not 6'8", at 6 feet, 208. Dow is a quarterback at Dayton, but sort of played a little bit of everything, sort of a dual threat. Maybe he's a receiver. Maybe they use him as a back at the next level. Who knows? But if you see him as an undrafted guy, remember where you heard his name first here, Cole Dow out of Dayton. So there are your 13 names. Those are your prototypical, Patriots for the 2024 draft class at receiver. Some names that you might be looking for that were omitted here. How about Tez Walker, Drake Maye's teammate? We've talked about him in the past here. Little light at 193. No short shuttle time. I mean, he checks every other box when it comes to the 4.36 40, the 40-inch vertical, 11+ foot broad jump. I mean, he is a special athlete. But it just so happens that he didn't check 5 of those boxes that we're looking for. Does that mean the Patriots won't draft him, that they won't be interested in him? That you can't, point and laugh at me when they do draft him in the 3rd round, potentially to pair with Drake Maye? No, you should. And I'm fine with that. But we did at some point have to draw a line with some of these metrics and say, how many people are we really going to include here? And so I think it's hard to call him a prototype. At 193, when 15 of the 18 receivers drafted in the 1st or 2nd round by Ron Wolf types, when 15 of 18 of those players weigh at least 197, and this guy's coming in at 193. I know it's 4 pounds, negligible difference. I get it, but he's not quite the prototype. And so I'm comfortable with him not being on the list this year. Same for Ladd McConkey. Just a little bit light. It's hard to include him on a list like this one. So there are a handful of names there. Roman Wilson, the receiver from Michigan, in terms of his size, he's just not there. How about Troy Franklin from Oregon, 175 pounds? You can't include him on a list like this one when he's that light. And these Packers guys, these Ron Wolf guys, have shown that they're looking for something more substantial than that. So that's why some of those players were left off. But fun exercise for me to do every year. Again, it's a little bit different parameters this time around since we're working off this Ron Wolf tree and we're not working off of Bill Belichick's history. But really, really interesting stuff there. You can see the write-up, the full write-up on NBCSportsBoston.com. More details on all these guys, all 13 names here. And we'll see if the Patriots end up selecting 1 or 2, perhaps, when draft weekend rolls around. All right, let's get to our conversation with Steve Palazzolo right now. Again, some great stuff on quarterbacks, on team building, on what to look for in quarterbacks while you're building a team. One of the brightest minds in our industry. So let's get to that conversation with Steve Palazzolo from Pro Football Focus right now.
Thrilled right now to have with us Steve Palazzolo, Pro Football Focus, many-time guest, really years-long friend of the podcast. Steve, thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Years long. It's been years.
Years long.
Yeah.
I mean, you have been providing us with knowledge that goes beyond whatever the layperson can even properly understand in their own small little pea brains. And so we appreciate you for
nice
that.
intro. I
Yes,
appreciate that.
yes.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, so now with your massive brain, you're going to give to us, hopefully, an elevator pitch on why your plan as Patriots general manager is the best plan. And we could. It's a relatively long elevator ride. Say we're going up to like the 45th floor or something. Yes.
We got some work to do. But first off, we're gonna value the right positions. We're gonna build through the draft, and we're gonna attack free agency in a smart way. Spend where you need to spend, and find starters at the right price. And I think that's it's going to take some time, but you build through the draft, you get the right players in the building, and that's it. And that's what I'm going to do.
So with the third pick overall, that is their prized asset this year, and they have plenty of money to spend in free agency. And maybe we can ask you about how they should be going about that, because that could impact how they handle the draft. But third overall, does it have to be a quarterback there, Steve?
I don't think it has to be. I'm interested in the buzz recently about Drake Maye, where people are maybe souring on him, and I don't know how true that is. I'm not souring on Drake Maye. I think Patriots should keep an eye on that. If he doesn't go at 1 or 2, for whatever, it doesn't go at 2, say. If he's available at 3, I'd take Drake Maye. I'm not there yet on a Jayden Daniels from LSU, a Bo Nix, or anyone else that could be there. So I don't think it has to be a quarterback. And then I think about how much patience do you want to have with Jerod Mayo and just like a whole new regime? And I think it's okay to be patient. So I don't think it has to be a quarterback, and I think the Marvin Harrison elite wide receiver move is an interesting one that should be on the table.
Okay, tell me why smart people really like Drake Maye, because I really like Jayden Daniels.
Yeah.
I think his speed is game-changing potentially, and it appears as though, having played in the SEC, his ability to take care of the football while still generating explosive plays is hard to find. And so what is it about Jayden Daniels that has you hesitant, whereas with Drake Maye, coming from the ACC, I think still a little rough around the edges? They all are in some ways.
Yeah.
But why would he be your guy over Daniels?
Okay, so look, Daniels first. I get scared a little bit of the 1 year of elite production. He was an okay quarterback at Arizona State and just okay at LSU last year in 2022. 23 is special, though. Obviously, he wins the Heisman. He should have won the Heisman. I'm glad that he won the Heisman because he was unstoppable last year in the SEC. My concern is, and I like a good running quarterback. I'm always looking for them, but I see the value in that, obviously. You're changing the way the defense plays. You need an offense that's going to lean into the rushing ability in the design run game. But with Daniels, there aren't as many plays purely from the pocket. He is more willing to bail on clean pockets. His sack rate's a little high. So there are some of those things that are concerning for the next level. I think he's a special runner. He's a good thrower, best slot fade probably in the draft here. They featured that a lot at LSU, so I love that. The Drake Maye thing, I understand why people might, have some hesitation. I think Drake Maye misses a lot of easy throws. That's a concern for me. But I look at him as just 2 years starting, still has room to grow. He is young. The footwork can be cleaned up. I think Drake Maye is one of the best middle-of-the-field throwers I've ever seen in college football.
Wow.
As far as the feel, throwing a seam route, throwing the ball around defenders, throwing with touch, layering it. The middle of the field is outstanding. I think he's got to work outside the numbers a little bit better. That's my quick take on Drake Maye, though.
It's really fascinating that you mentioned that, because for us, having watched Mac Jones as much as we did, it felt like one of his redeeming qualities going into this past season was he's pretty efficient in the middle of the field.
Right.
And those tend to be the most efficient throws. Now, outside the numbers was a struggle for him
Right.
at times, probably in part because he doesn't have the arm talent that some of the guys who are phenomenal outside the numbers, whether it's Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Trevor Lawrence, he doesn't have that kind of juice.
Right.
And so he'll never be that guy. Drake Maye, if he already has the middle of the field stuff, Steve, does he not also have the physical tools to be a true, quote unquote, make all the throws kind of guy as a pro?
Yeah, he does. I think for Maye, he does. He's got a better arm than Mac Jones. And then the arm talent, like for Mac Jones to get around the arm talent, you have to play with confidence. You have to play earlier. He was doing the opposite of that, of course, last year. I think Maye has all the ability to drive the ball outside the numbers, to throw on the move. I think because of what Mahomes and Josh Allen and some of the Lamar Jackson, what those guys have done in the NFL, you do want some of that out of structure stuff. I do think Maye has that, some of those spectacular plays off script. So I think he has all the tools. For me, with Maye, like I said, I think you got to clean up the footwork. You got to clean up some of the easy stuff. He's got to hit all of his gimmies, but I do think he has the ability to #make all the throws.
There you go. And listen, Patriots just hired Alex Van Pelt, who is a long time quarterbacks coach. He doesn't have a ton of experience as an offensive coordinator last 4 years in Cleveland, but didn't call plays. But as a quarterbacks coach, he's pretty widely respected. So some of these things like the footwork, cleaning up the very, makeable layups that he has available to him, maybe that's something that Van Pelt could really work with. I wanted to ask you quickly about linemen, because we are starting to consider at the top of the draft for the Patriots linemen more than we have maybe in the previous few weeks. If they get the right guy at tackle near the top of the draft, can that be the cure-all for a line that looks like it has multiple holes right now? I mean, they don't have a starting caliber tackle under contract. So is one guy enough to sort of raise all boats there?
No, but it's not sexy, but I think it's okay. To me, Joe Alt is that guy at Notre Dame, where I feel the best about him from a pure run blocking, pass protection standpoint. The tackle thing doesn't solve everything, but I think the reason why those guys go high, it is tough to find offensive tackles, and when you look at the value that they do bring on a first contract, on a rookie contract, it is one of the most valuable positions in the league. I mean, the NFL's known this for years. That's why they you get your tackles high, you get your edge defenders high. It might not feel great for fans, but it'll definitely be a step in the right direction. And once you get that one piece at tackle, it does make it okay. Then you say, okay, we just need an adequate starter on the other side. I always use the term creep back toward average on the offensive line. They don't need to be elite. You don't need to have the best offensive line in the NFL. You don't want a weakness, as New England has had the last couple of years. When it's a weakness, it's tough to run the offense. It's tough to overcome. So at least having a tackle is a step in that direction.
What's interesting about maybe going that direction is I think people at large believe that going with a tackle is more likely to hit than going with a quarterback. Is that true, though? Are the hit rates better taking linemen than they are taking quarterbacks? Because at quarterback, it does feel like it's a coin flip just about every single year near the top of the draft. But is the same true for linemen, and we just refuse to acknowledge that?
I could spend a lot of time breaking this down.
I love it.
I think the problem here is, the problem with talking about hit rate for quarterback is that the standard is so high, right? If Mac Jones went out there and had an adequate season next year, if he was a mid-tier solid starter, would you call that a hit? You would be sitting there at the end of year 4 being like, I don't want him back. I don't want a middle-class quarterback. I want an elite quarterback. With a tackle, if he's a middle-of-the-pack starter, it might not feel great, but he's starting. He's out there every week, and he's fine. So the standard is higher for quarterbacks. So I think that's why when you look back and it's like everybody missed on all these quarterbacks, first off, you have to take that chance, because what's the alternative? The alternative of not drafting a quarterback is you're stuck in whatever situation you have, or you're getting whichever mid-level free agent is available. Every now and again, a big name hits free agency and can change your franchise. So you have to take those shots at quarterback. And when you look at hit rates, it's because we want a top 8 guy, and that's what changes your franchise. Just getting so the standard's higher. The standard's not find a starter. At tackle, if you get a starter, or at corner, if you just get a starter, it's usually okay. If Christian Gonzalez just becomes a good starter, if he's not even as good as we think he's going to be, if he's just good, you say, all right, that's a good draft pick. Or like a Ty Warren back in the day.
Right.
That's a hit. He's a good, solid
Eric
starter.
Fisher, he was number 1 overall, so you might still say that was kind of a myth, but he ended up starting a ton of games for a winning team and contributing.
Right. So I think just the standard is different. And the thing I always try to say to franchises that need a quarterback, if you hit on just a solid tackle, that's fine. But if you miss on it, you have to take the chance at quarterback. At some point. I'm not saying like the Patriots have to do it this year and at number 3, but at some point you have to take the chance at quarterback, because the payout is uneven, right? The payout is great. The downside is like, all right, we're in the same position that we were before.
I mentioned Eric Fisher, and it's just getting my brain going now. So I want to ask you, is the Chiefs model replicable? Not that anybody's ever going to find another Patrick Mahomes, but the way they did it, it's funny. About a decade ago, the Chiefs were in a situation similar to the one that the Patriots are in now. New head coach. He was much more experienced than Jayden Maye is, but new head coach. They had the number 1 overall pick. They ended up taking the tackle on Eric Fisher. The Patriots have the 3rd overall pick. They signed a free agent quarterback, and Alex Smith, who ended up winning a lot of games for them. is that the route they should go, Steve, in a perfect world? And then eventually, down the line, when you find the guy you love, you get really aggressive and you make sure you land him. Is that something they should be attacking?
I've seen people bring up the Chiefs model this week. And again, it all starts with Mahomes, the same way we know what Tom Brady did here in New England, right? There's reasons why people are having Brady versus Belichick debates and all these different things. And we know that Brady, the elite quarterback, has the biggest impact on football, basically, right? So I don't know how you're going to replicate that in Kansas City. Because if you took Mahomes off the roster and you put Alex Smith back on it, nobody's saying, oh, look at the Chiefs in the Super Bowl this week, probably, right? So that part's tough to replicate. The idea, though, if we can have a patient fan base here, the idea that we're going to get back from, a 4-win team to, let's just be a playoff caliber team and get a quarterback and build just have a good, solid roster across the board. If that's the route that they want to go, you have to at least take that step first. So that's just about getting good players across the board, whether it's an Eric Fisher type, a starting tackle as a starting point, and then get a good enough quarterback. I don't know, but the one thing about the Chiefs that they did that seems to have worked out, though, trading one Tyreek Hill for 5 players, for 5 draft picks. They made that decision. I wouldn't have made that decision. I would have been afraid to see Patrick Mahomes without Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce because that felt like such a cheat code. But the Chiefs made that point and said 5 players are more valuable than 1, and they found multiple starters in the draft and created their best defense. I think that's the part that might be something that teams can copy, the idea that maybe you don't put all your eggs into just one elite wide receiver type of basket. We've seen success on both sides of that coin, though.
Are these two teams in the Super Bowl built in similar ways then, in terms of just finding good players, and then eventually you get your quarterback, and if you get lucky, and both teams, got lucky to a degree. Certainly in Brock Purdy, as Mr. Irrelevant, being as good as he's been. But even with Patrick Mahomes, they were aggressive to go get him. They identified him, yes, but if they knew he was going to be one of the best quarterbacks ever, they would have found a way to trade all the way to number 1.
Right.
So was it a similar approach to how these two teams were built, do you think?
I think the Niners might be the blueprints that New England fans might want to look at, because when Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, they got 6-year contracts starting in 2017. They had the number 2 overall pick, and they had a chance to draft Mitch Trubisky. They had a chance to draft Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, and they traded down. They said, we have 6-year contracts, basically. We're going to take our time. We're not going to go get our quarterback yet. And then at midseason, they trade for Jimmy Garoppolo. That was the first quarterback move that they made. But it did feel like they said, let's build the roster first. They went and got Garoppolo, and then the roster's getting better and better, and then they said, okay, we want to move on from Garoppolo, and they kind of made that similar move. We're going to be aggressive for the next quarterback, and they stumbled into Purdy. But the idea that they had the number 2 overall pick and said, we're not necessarily going to force a quarterback. You could argue they should have taken a Deshaun Watson. They should have taken a Mahomes.
They took Nick Bosa, right? It was Bosa
that was the year they took Solomon Thomas.
Geez.
And they missed.
Oh, boy, yes.
So obviously they missed.
Huge whiff.
On Solomon Thomas. But they the idea was we're going to build the roster before the quarterback, right? And they did get there. And then it's like you've got your Deebo Samuels, your Brandon Ayuks, and they did a great job there. So that might be the pattern if we can exhibit some patience here. Build the roster first. Maybe there's a transition year or 2 at quarterback, but build our way up to getting that QB.
It's really interesting because they did have to hit, whether it's Deebo Samuel in the 2nd round, Fred Warner in the 3rd round, George Kittle in the 5th round. I mean, they hit on a ton of non-first round picks who ended up being not just usable players.
Going back to my GM pitch, we would find those
best
players.
In the league at
my
these
draft model would find all those players. We'd get all those elite players in New England. Where's Robert and Jonathan? You guys listen.
The draft model is that is that in PDF form? How do we? Oh, it's just all.
It's me. I've got
up in your head right now.
It's on a laminated sheet right now for this year.
Do you hold it up in front of your face like you're calling plays on the NFL sideline?
Yes.
During the draft?
I hold it up, yeah.
Yeah, you got to go with...
hold it up.
You got to go with Jayden Daniels.
If you draft blues and greens off my draft model, you double, triple your hit rate. That's the rule. That's how it goes.
What the heck? How does this... What sort of wizardry is this?
Just looking at the data, man.
It's all data-based?
There is a lot of good data as far as projecting draft prospects and eliminating your potential misses.
We won't look for every little detail of your draft model, Steve, but you have to tell us what's the number 1 thing you look for in quarterbacks? College quarterbacks, you're looking at them, you want to figure out what is most projectable, what this guy's going to be in the league. What's the number 1 thing?
I should highlight the model's not great with quarterbacks. Nobody's great.
Wait, come on.
Well, because of the standard that we said, there's nothing great there's no easy way to find quarterbacks.
That's true. Okay. So that's the context. We understand that.
Yeah.
But please, proceed. Is there one thing that we should be focused on?
There's
and say, hey, Steve Palazzolo told me if a quarterback does X well at the college level, it could work out pretty well.
I'll tell you what, though. I'm leaning toward natural playmaking. So I like to quantify everything. I don't know how you quantify that, but I want to see a guy that is a natural playmaker. My old friend Zach Robinson, who I know was interviewing here in New England for the offensive coordinator job. He was working for PFF when Patrick Mahomes came out, and he's just like, the dude knows, like, he just makes plays. And I'm over here like, he's overthrowing a screen and he's throwing the ball into coverage, and it's like, no, he just makes plays and he's got feel for the game. So however you want to classify that, the guys that have had success in recent years, the Mahomes and Lamars and Josh Allens and Justin Herberts, they do have that natural playmaking ability. Now, you can get duped by maybe a Zach Wilson sometimes too. That's the whole point. Like, nothing's 100% hit rate. But you want to see a natural playmaker, inside structure and outside of structure, with his legs, with his arm, in multiple scenarios. I think that is the number one thing that can translate at the next level.
Steve Palazzolo, you're a playmaker in our opinion.
Oh, thank you.
We appreciate you. Thanks for being with us here on Next Pats.
Yeah, Phil, thanks for having me.
Great stuff there from Steve. Just one of our many Super Bowl conversations. Again, this is months ago now, but I think a lot of the conversation holds up in terms of natural playmaking ability and that playing at the next level and why you need it. Some of the reasoning for why he prefers Drake Maye over Jayden Daniels. And you could hear me at the time. I was more of a Jayden Daniels guy at the time. But the more we report, the more we talk to people, the more I have elevated Drake Maye. It's not so much dropping Jayden Daniels. It's seeing the upside and the potential and understanding big picture what you need to win, especially in the AFC for the next 10 years or more. I like what Drake Maye has to offer, and I like his potential for being more durable than Jayden Daniels as well. Would I still draft Jayden Daniels at 3 overall if Drake Maye went at 2 to the Commanders? I would. I would just have a little bit more nervousness associated with that pick than I would if it was Drake Maye who was the choice at 3. But we appreciate Steve. We thank him so much for his time. As always, we thank you for your time. We thank John the Skull Crusher Henry for doing a phenomenal job producing all of these podcasts the way he does, nose to the grindstone, especially this time of year where we've got Patriots Talk pods. We've got Next Pats pods multiple times a week. You've got the Celtics Talk pod. Hopefully you have subscribed to that and you're listening to that on a regular basis as well with Chris Forsberg. So much content to throw in your faces, to hit your ear holes. We appreciate you all of those eyeballs, all of those ear holes, and we'll hit you with another episode of Next Pats very, very soon here. Later this week, another tremendous conversation. We're going to bring in Charles Davis of NFL Media. This guy's great. Just so much fun to talk to, so much knowledge there. Such a pleasant conversation with Charles Davis. I'm a huge fan of his work, and it was great to have him on the pod. So we'll have that for you later this week. We'll talk to you then.